welcome you all to this virtual policy dialogue on rethinking the role of cities and urban function. And I would like to give a warm welcome to our speaker, Dr. Tsuyoshi Hashimoto, who's Chief Executive Director of RECS International, who will be sharing his experiences on the role of cities and urban functions moving forward. I also welcome the moderator for the panel discussion, Professor Piyush Tiwari, who's Professor of Property at the University of Melbourne, and our panelists, Ms. Sunghoon Chris Moon of ADB, Mr. Antoine Sarat of RECS International, Dr. Aloysia Ezra Mallory, Urban Planning Consultant, and Ms. Farhat Chowdhury of ADB's Bangladesh Resident Mission. COVID-19 has reinforced the need for healthy, livable, and resilient cities, highlighting the relationship between health, space, and infrastructure. With social distancing measures and the shift to working from home, there is a need to rethink the function and development of urban spaces. We hope that this presentation and discussion today will not only highlight ongoing issues and findings in the COVID-19 era of urban development, but also lay the foundation for further research on urban growth and resilience. This policy dialogue is also going to be the launch for a call for policy papers on rethinking cities as resilient engines of growth after the COVID-19 pandemic. And project committee member, Ms. Kyoko Takahashi of the University of Tokyo will officially announce the event. So I look forward to active participation by all, and I now hand over to Veronica. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. So we will be starting with our keynote presentation. And our keynote presenter is Dr. Tsuyoshi Hashimoto. He's the Chief Executive Director of RECS International. He is a highly experienced urban and regional planner with consultancy experience in over 50 countries on urban and regional development, environment, water resources management, and social development. We are delighted to hear from him today. Over to you, Dr. Hashimoto.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, Dr. Peter Morgan. Good afternoon from Tokyo. Good morning and good evening to you, depending on where you are. My name is Hashimoto. I'm the speaker for today's seminar. I have to set the slide. I have a slide prepared for this occasion, and I'll ask my colleague to share it with you. I belong to an old generation. I need support for ICT. You look at the first slide with the title of my presentation, which has been given by Dr. Sitaram, long and good friend of mine, no doubt. This is the big theme, big title, and I don't mean to be an expert on all the aspects of this title. So in my presentation, I'll be putting more questions rather than presenting answers. I believe you're familiar with resilience and robustness concepts, which are becoming increasingly popular in many fields where decision-making are involved under various and actually increasing uncertainties. But these concepts, resilience and robustness, are old subject for me. I wrote my PhD dissertation in 1980, long time ago, with the themes of resilience and robustness criteria for water resources development plan. I'm a development consultant, almost retired, and over 40 plus years career, I have provided consulting services in more or less 40 mostly developing countries in various subjects, and urban and regional development is one important subject. In the past decades, almost two decades, I've been thinking and talking about paradigm shifts in various fields while I was teaching at Gakushuin University. Urbanization is, of course, one important field for our thought on paradigm shift. That's today's subject. Many people are talking about urbanization or accelerating urbanization actually, as a matter of course. But I like to put first a fundamental question. Is urbanization inevitable? Historically, city developed as a venue for exchange of products from its rural hinterlands. So main functions of cities is trade services, which are supported by other services, financial services and administrative services. Other economic activities were traditionally located somewhere else, not in the city, as you can see. But globalization and ICT development have been changing the situation rapidly. New phenomena, as shown here, are observed increasingly. Factory-type agriculture, automated control of production conditions, crop production conditions, where farmer may be sitting in a nearby city, mining by AI-operated machine, and design and branding of manufactured goods in urban areas, and so on. Virtual tourism is my pet idea. Virtual tourism may be a lucrative urban business in the future, like in the movie Total Recall by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Classic. These changes are characterized by servicization, the term I coined, service-oriented economic development. A city, as I said, is where services take place. Therefore, further urbanization is indeed inevitable. This is my claim. I would welcome your challenge. On the next slide, on upper left, I listed up some conditions that affect strongly future urbanization. Climate change and global warming, ICT development and digital transformation. Most recently, COVID-19 has provided opportunity to renew our views on effects of urbanization with respect to city size, population concentration, and urban governance. And old issue of economic efficiency as against environmental health has been renewed. On the upper right of the same slide, I have listed some of the responses recently observed. I trust you're familiar with SDGs and ESG investment. Governments of many developed countries announced ambitious CO2 reduction targets, and individuals and firms are expected to respond to them. Global environmental movement by young people utilize communication by SNS effectively. Fearless Cities Network, which I learned relatively recently, may be the most radical movement to improve urban governance. I will not get into any of these activities in detail. I cannot do that. But I'd like you to note that they have some common characteristics. Municipalism, local initiative, participatory or bottom-up approach, social goods are common, and inclusiveness. These are all commendable moves, but for these piecemeal actions to take meaningful effects, some fundamental change should be caused to link them and integrate grassroots actions for global effects. In other words, some kind of paradigm shift is necessary, and paradigm shifts would inevitably involve some political alignment, political realignment rather. This is my conjecture to test for your consideration. Term paradigm shift for most people may not be familiar, somewhat vague, and probably too big to conceive. It is not, however, an idea far from your daily life. In Mongolia, I've been involved in technical cooperation projects of the Japanese government in the past few years, where I have been advocating a need for a paradigm shift for development from mining-led high economic growth, which Mongolia has attained recently, to more diversified economy to generate a variety of employment opportunities and enhance actual resilience of social economy. To explain the paradigm shift in Mongolia, I show this slide. I explained to the Mongolian people that they have actually experienced a paradigm shift from a socialistic paradigm before 1990 to a largely capitalistic one with some remnants of socialistic flavors or liberalist flavor. More importantly, Mongolia has started already another paradigm shift towards sustainable development, responding to the United Nations SDGs initiative. This is the way I encourage and motivate Mongolian people for the necessary paradigm shift. On the next slide, I compare two distinct development paradigms. I consider this comparison table my original, but not 100% so. I have to admit, I learned from the classic economist born in Germany, Joseph Schumpeter of early 20th century, who is famous for the theory on innovation. The 20th century development model is characterized by intensive use of resources and economic efficiency orientation. This is a paradigm that many advanced countries pursued during the past century and probably beyond. This has resulted in high economic growth in many countries, but it resulted in many social and environmental problems, which now jeopardize human existence. Obviously, or at least I feel it obvious, that we would have to shift away from this development paradigm. The alternative social economy, as I call, is an alternative to the 20th century development paradigm. The fundamental difference between these two paradigms are in the ways that we look at resources. The 20th century development model sees resources as income. You may imagine underground resources like mineral resources. You are practically sitting on them. As you dig out resources, you gain immediately income. You get immediate gain on income. More you dig out, higher income you gain. So this tends to result in abuse of resources. The alternative social economy, on the other hand, sees resources as capital, which should be conserved as much as possible so that it will continue to support various socio-economic activities for generations to come. The alternative social economy emphasizes on generating the largest number of employment opportunities to make people happier. Employment opportunities mean income. Income means various activities that you like to undertake. In this connection, I'd like to say that the Japanese government recently advocating work-life balance sounds sensible, but this is dichotomy, in my opinion. This dichotomy is a wrong perception. In fact, work is an integral part of life, isn't it? This is the idea behind alternative social economy model. In Mongolia, we have been formulating National Comprehensive Development Plan under the Mongolian version of alternative social economy. As you know, Mongolian Empire was the first country in the human history that realized globalization with respect to international trade and in financial transaction. International trade supported by postal roads and waterway systems, and financial transaction based on silver, newly imported from the New World. The One Belt, One Road initiative by China is only a recent replication. I will not get into details on these aspects, but I'd like to point out that Mongolian Empire was built on the unique philosophy of nomadic culture, which some claims was derived from the great Genghis Khan. I don't know. Still, we can learn from what is known as Genghis admonition. It says, when slaughtering animals, don't waste even a drop of blood that would spoil the soil. Or don't dig out faster indiscriminately, that will result in desertification. Don't pollute river water. The point I'd like to make here is that we may learn from traditional ideas, traditional wisdom and ideas, and we should ask how to substantiate them by advanced technology. With this as a sort of background, I'd like to talk about future urbanization from a few points of view. We think of optimized size of city, can we? Or ideal morphology of city. This is a classic issue. Many people and experts have compared megacity and compact city. The COVID-19 pandemic has provided another viewpoint for this issue. Megacity can realize economy of scale for various economic and social activities. Megacity can accommodate more diversified activities and high-grade social services within the city. But megacity has resulted in many social and environmental problems, such as traffic congestion, air pollution, and social alienation. Concentration population in larger cities is a disadvantage against the pandemics, as we learned recently. Compact city may realize cost-effective infrastructure provision. Compact city can make social services more accessible for residents. It may not enjoy scale economy per se, but actually compact city may also realize scale economy if the population density is increased. But this will result in the same problem as a mega city, although the densification will make infrastructure costs comparatively smaller. A fundamental problem with the compact city is that it cannot stay compact unless we control urban sprawl effectively. So the question here, can we make cities enjoy advantages of mega and compact cities while overcoming their disadvantages? One answer may be a multi-core city. Excuse me, I have a problem with my throat. I lose 5 seconds. Time is clicking. Multi-core city consists of several urban centers in a city, separated by greenery and mutually linked by effective urban transport system. Each urban center is a compact city, self-sufficient in daily urban functions, and at the same time, specialized in some higher order urban function, respectively, such as high-grade medical services, advanced educational research, mass entertainment facility functions, and so on. All the urban centers may develop in a mutually complementary manner by sharing these higher order urban functions of other urban centers linked by effective transport and ICT infrastructure. I'll give you an example, a surprise example. I prepared a master development plan for the Kabul metropolitan area in Afghanistan, of course, a long time ago, covering the existing Kabul city and a new city planned to the north. That was a few years after 9/11. In the Kabul city, several urban areas are separated first by the Kabul River flowing through the central part of the city, and also by 7 hills called 7 lungs of Kabul. Moreover, there remain large farmlands within the city boundaries. As most large cities, Kabul city was facing rapid population increase, especially after the end of civil war at that time, to make expansion of water supply necessary by developing new water sources. Looking at the situation in a different way, we faced a typical case of classic issue, whether we should bring water to the people or rather bring people to the water. The movie Chinatown by Jack Nicholson and Faye Dunaway. The World Bank mission at that time recommended to utilize part of the farmland to accommodate more people by bringing additional water from outside. Appeared to be a sensible recommendation because Kabul city has plenty of land here. And water resources are available somewhere else, not far from the city. After some thought, I realized this would cause a disaster. Existing farmlands and Seven Hills serve as part of recharging area of shallow groundwater, which is a source of water supply for the majority of Kabul residents. Developing the farmland for settlement would decrease the recharging capacity, and bringing the water from outside would cause inundation of city, which was suffering already inundation during heavy rains due to poor drainage. Doubly, World Bank recommendation, if adopted, could be detrimental. Therefore, we decided to plan a new city in the north, closer to the new water source in Tamjishi River Basin. So this is a case of people to water. And we planned a new Kabul city with multiple ports, separated by large parks with public facilities and protected gullies, following the model of the Kabul city itself. The second issue for future urbanization is represented by resilient city and city networking. Resilient city definition is given here. A city with high capability to adapt to changes in internal and external conditions and to recover quickly from the adverse effects of such changes, including natural disasters. Responses to natural disasters are particularly important for resilient city issue. Two methods to enhance resilience are easily conceived. One is to provide options or alternatives. The other one is to provide redundancies. You are looking at the simple example there. The map on the slide shows a small region in Papua New Guinea called the Kokopo-Rava region, which is a disaster-prone region suffering from volcanic eruptions, floods, and landslides. The Tokyo International Airport, the main airport, I hope you can see on the small map. Tokyo International Airport, the main airport of the region, was totally buried by volcanic ash during the eruption of Tavuvu volcano in 1994. And the city of Rabaul, then the capital of the region, was destroyed. To enhance resilience of the Kokopo-Rabaul region, alternative artery road was conceived inland to complement the existing coastal road that is vulnerable to landslides. An alternative airport was also conceived. In order to justify additional investments for these somewhat redundant infrastructure facilities, regional development was conceived, covering a larger area with several small cities. I kept saying conceived. There's the reason, because my proposal was not accepted. Anyway, options, alternatives, and redundancy make a city resilient. I discussed mainly physical conditions. City networking is another way to enhance resilience of the cities. Original form of city networking is a municipal alliance between small and medium-sized municipalities for more efficient joint provision of public services, such as water supply with a common water source and solid waste management with a common final disposal site. City networking may be conceived in a much larger scale. An international city networking consisting of larger cities in different countries can be conceived. Each city specializes in high-grade urban services, respectively, such as international financial center function, logistic hub function, energy-based function, and so on. All the high-grade urban functions are shared by member cities for complementary development. Other costs for urban function to share are listed here. Storage and supply of basic food in preparation for food crisis. Rescue and restoration from disasters such as earthquakes and flooding are particularly important in the present day context. Next slide is a slight digression. This schematic, my original, shows my interpretation of future city networking proposed in the latest National Land Structure Plan of Japan, published in 2016. This, in fact, represents multiple cities linked by effective transport and communication system infrastructure to share higher order urban functions in a complementary way. Each city has unique characteristics and specialized core functions. Each city is a multiple city, having several urban centers, each self-sufficient in daily urban functions. So that is a double layer multi-core city network. All the cities are linked by effective transport communication infrastructure to share higher order urban functions in a complementary way. The third issue for future urbanization is presented by what I call a regional city. If I should choose one specialized field among many, regional development is one, rather than urban development. Regional development, as I define, is socioeconomic development by using indigenous resources by the local people for the benefit of local people, supported by local administration. You utilize what you have in your own territory for your own purpose to realize your own benefits, to realize self-reliant regional development. Globalization makes self-reliant regional development a challenge. We cannot live in a self-contained region where residents produce and consume all they need. Why? Because when better products are coming from outside and sold within this region at a lower price, no one can say, don't buy them, buy the local products. You cannot say that. Products not competing in the global market. And in fact, industries producing products not competing in the global market cannot survive. This is a harsh reality of globalization. As a necessary condition for any region to survive in globalization, we need a city having direct access to the global market. I call it the regional city. A regional city is a sizable city that links directly to global market to ensure, or rather to link to global market physically and institutionally as a necessary condition for self-reliant regional development. Conditions for viable regional city are listed here. The first three conditions are obvious. A regional city should have certain size, 500,000 to 1 million population, or probably larger. Proper urban infrastructure and the proper urban management to ensure low economic transaction costs, and international airport and port facilities. Relationship with its hinterland is more important for a regional city. As a basic condition, there must be industries producing exportable goods in its hinterland with respect to quality and prices. Primary and secondary industries in the hinterland and the tertiary industry in the regional city should have complementary relationships. A regional city not only exports products from hinterland, it imports advanced technology from outside and creates innovative design in both ways to support primary and secondary industry in the hinterland. An example clarifies the issue. On the small map in the middle, you're looking at the Japan archipelago, and the red portion is Niigata Prefecture in the middle of the archipelago. You can see an enlarged map on the left, Tsubame City. Tsubame City in Niigata Prefecture is famous for its metal works, very famous actually, producing high quality kitchen utensils and other products. It has a population of only 80,000, so it cannot be a regional city. Niigata City, the capital of the prefecture, located some 30 kilometers from Tsubame City, has a population of 800,000. It has major port facilities and international airport. So Niigata City is well qualified as a regional city. Although at present, international air services are limited to a few neighboring countries. Fourth and last issue for future urbanization is urban governance, which is at the bottom of all the urban issues. First, let us summarize what we have learned or observed so far. Confirming urbanization is inevitable. We have presented 4 or 5 different models of future cities or present cities. Megacity represent trade-offs between economy of scale and environmental problems. To reconcile these different aspects, metropolitan governance may be desired. Compact city should not be a self-contained stationary city, and to control city expansion and urban sprawl, proper urban governance is required. Resilient city is supported by option, alternatives, and redundancy, and city networking. Prerequisite for city networking is the presence of cities of autonomous governance. Regional city is supported by economic interaction with its hinterland and integrated governance, covering both regional city and its hinterland may be desired. As you can see, for all the city types, urban governance holds a key for desirable future city development. I hope you have noticed so far I have deliberately neglected another important type of future city, smart city, that many people are talking about these days. More than a few experiments are going on in both developing and developed countries. I can say smart city may solve all the problems foreseen for other types of future cities and realize desirable urbanization. I've said that. But this statement does not have any meaning unless we clarify the most important aspect of urbanization, that is urban governance. Otherwise, we'll be just saying a smart city is an ideal city by definition. It doesn't mean anything. How to build most appropriate structure to manage various voluntary free activities undertaken by residents and firms in the city, ensuring free city atmosphere. This is the issue. Do we want centrally controlled management of efficiency, or we'd like to build self-reliant governance by bottom-up approach based on residents and private firms? Questions and questions. Recently, we observed 2 major phenomena affecting future urban governance. First, ICT development with 5G and soon 6G communication systems will change relationship between urban and rural areas for sure. Definitely change habitation patterns and may change spatial perception of people as well. What do I mean? Rural residents may enjoy rural life in pleasant nature, receiving high quality remote education and high quality remote health services, or otherwise he may work for service industry in a nearby city. An urban resident will work in the nearby office and may have access to rural environment virtually on a big screen installed in his office. Rural environment he sees on this big screen may appear to be as real as the office environment surrounding him. He may feel like walking immediately into the rural environment after a hard working day. Or probably he will decide to visit there during the next weekend. He would feel closer to the rural environment surrounding the city he lives and works in, thanks to 5G and 6G communication systems. This may result in new spatial perception. Urban residents may perceive surrounding rural area as a new form of Satoyama, or home countryside. Traditional Satoyama in Japan provides recreation area, weekend recreation area for nearby residents, seasonal food such as mushrooms and bamboo shoots, if you like, and protection against disasters, the shelter during disasters. The second major phenomenon affecting future urban governance is, of course, pandemic. Many countries practice city lockdown as countermeasures against COVID-19. The strong national authority to enforce the city lockdown is clearly against the universal trend of localization of development administration. We anticipate changes in relationship between urban and rural areas, habitation patterns, and spatial perception of people. Then we need an open and dynamic urbanization model that would allow viable relationship between a regional city and its hinterland, compact but not stationary city, resilient city with useful redundancies, city networking alliances, and local autonomy. These desirable changes would be ensured by open and dynamic urbanization model. We will definitely reject authoritarian model of urban governance just for ease of city lockdown. For self-reliant regional development in a global society, regional city is important, as I have just discussed. Can we think of region-based urban governance that covers, in a comprehensive manner, both the regional city and its rural hinterland, strongly linked to it? This may be seen as a new form of localization of development administration. Worldwide, ratio of urban population to the total population exceeded 50% in 2007, and it may become 68% by 2050, according to the United Nations projection. I don't care. The urbanization rate becomes 100% immediately if we introduce region-based urban governance all over. So my claim would be new urban governance covering enlarged urban area, encompassing urbanized area and surrounding rural area, would facilitate fundamental solution to various urban problems, including control of pandemics. I have 5 minutes to go. I'll waste five seconds. Before I conclude my presentation today, I'd like to call your attention to another lesson we learned from COVID-19. That is, more people have realized the importance of essential workers. Essential workers include medical staff and caretakers, for sure, those involved in operation and maintenance of lifeline infrastructure. But farmers producing essential food, aren't they essential workers? Without food, we cannot survive. Those ensuring supply of basic daily commodities, basic clothing and shelters, aren't they essential workers who create comfortable, pleasant living environment? Their works cannot be undertaken online. They contribute to creation of, in other words, social goods or common, which help us pursue creative lives of our own without much worrying about survival. I said survival for a reason. In fact, survival of human beings at stake. Survival from global warming, survival from pandemics, survival from possible nuclear wars, survival from terrorism of various sorts. I started my presentation today by saying city is a venue for exchange of products from its hinterland. Now, exchange of ideas is more important. So I would say city is a venue for exchange of diversified ideas and values through wide communication between peoples of different social cultural backgrounds, which I believe is necessary for our survival. This is my concluding remark today. Thank you so much for your attention. 3 minutes more, not bad.
Thank you very much. An excellent keeping within the time as well. So we will now move on to, oh, sorry, let me bring up the. next slide. Okay. Thank you very much for the excellent presentation. We will now move on to the panel discussion. And I'd just like to remind all participants that we really encourage you to share your questions or your comments through Menti. So the link is in the chat and you can join via your browser or your phone. So any questions submitted through Menti, we will address in the open Q&A later. On to the panel discussion. Our moderator today is Professor Tsuyoshi Tiwari, a professor of property at the University of Melbourne. He has previously served as Director of Policy at the Infrastructure Development Finance Company in India and held positions at the University of Aberdeen in the UK, HDFC in India, and University of Tsukuba in Japan. I will also briefly introduce our panelists. Ms. Seung-Hoon Chris Moon is an urban development specialist as part of the urban sector group in the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department at the Asian Development Bank. She leads an initiative entitled Integrated and Innovative Solutions for More Livable Cities. Mr. Antoine Sorat is an urban and regional planner at Rex International. He has been working in Tokyo for 15 years as a consultant in urban and regional planning, both on domestic and international projects, especially under the scheme of cooperation and development assistance. Dr. Aloysia Ezra-Malari is an urban planning consultant, licensed environmental planner, and holds PhD in urban and regional planning from the University of the Philippines. He has also been involved as a consultant in several land use project planning projects in the Philippines with his expertise. And last but not least, Ms. Farhat Chowdhury is a senior project officer for environment and manages environmental safeguards of investment projects in Bangladesh at the Asian Development Bank's Bangladesh Resident Mission. She has more than 22 years of professional experience in environmental management. So I will now hand over the floor to Professor Tiwari to moderate the panel discussion time. Over to you, Professor Tiwari.
Thank you very much, Veronica. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, okay. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Hashimoto for very engaging talk, which sets the stage for the panel discussion today. There are a few interesting mentions, few interesting points that your talk raised. One was that you recognize that urbanization is inevitable. However, we need a paradigm shift in the development model. You also alluded to the fact that alliance of small and medium-sized cities for provision of public services would become necessary. And the future urbanization model that you were proposing is of a regional city, which has also the role for ICT and some of the challenges that we faced during the pandemic and response to them. And also the role of networking, local autonomy, region-based urban governance. So all these were ingredients of how a future city or future urbanization will look like. Now, when we look at the examples of network cities, they have been there for some time. Randstad in Netherlands is one of them, or even in Japan, Kansai region is also a fantastic example of network cities. There are also examples of knowledge corridor linkages such as Uppsala and Stockholm in Sweden, Cambridge and London in the UK. Your proposal for multi-core city is interesting, and it does avoid some of the challenges that large city with a central core or network cities face. We have seen some of these trends in large global cities, say for example in London or Mumbai. These have been largely the responses to the challenges that core faced and decentralization objectives that planners wanted to achieve to address those challenges. May I pose my first question to Dr. Hashimoto? How would you see multi-core objectives with specialization of functions and activities at multiple cores being implemented in an existing large city?
Yeah, well, I prefer to prepare beautiful urban development plan from scratch, more or less, in developing countries context. But the fact is that there are so many mega cities already. But those mega cities have some functional division, consists of several districts with different characteristics, which have developed through history, long histories, basically supported by residents. I look at the situation in a very simplified way first. Urban residents are happy under two conditions. If they have employment opportunities. Two, if they have pleasant, comfortable living environment, right?
Right.
And second condition may be difficult to satisfy. I take easy example, Tokyo. Tokyo has several districts, central Tokyo, having different characteristics, very different characteristics. Shibuya is entertainment city for youth. Ueno is an art and culture center. Let's see, Shinjuku is a new business district. And what else? Ginza, high-class shopping district, and so on. These functions, divisions, developed through long histories, basically supported by residents. But Japanese cities, Tokyo particularly, lacks the second condition, comfortable living environment. So, I would say if we locate open space with greenery and some public facilities properly between these districts, people should be happy. And that Tokyo would be a good example of a multi-core city, would become. But this is based on certain conditions. I think the two or three conditions are important to realize this. Planning, and not only just planning, planning at the right level in a hierarchical structure of planning system. Two, regulations, land use related regulation, law and the institution related to land use control. And three, participation of local residents. These conditions are not necessarily satisfied to realize multi-core city, but I think it is possible. In the developing countries, it may be easier, having strong national government initiative, but to create large open space, greenery, public facility, and so on. But there's no guarantee that the resident will enjoy them unless there is a good mechanism for participatory planning and development. So it is possible, not easy, but possible. And many cities can be converted into multi-core cities with proper institutional arrangement, legal institutional arrangement. This is too general, but this is my easy answer. Sorry, Professor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Hashimoto. But would it require significant reconfiguration of activities and built space in an existing city?
But you see, as long as the people are happy living there, with the characteristics unique to the district he lives in, and as long as we can convince them that the reconfiguration of physical structure and activity would make living conditions better, I think we can realize such changes even in existing mega cities.
Yeah, I agree with you, because Tokyo has an interesting model, which is land trust model, where residents came together and were convinced, and that could utilize the land in much better way in that way. Now, another question which your talk raised is because you were alluding to the fact that there has to be a specialization and compact cities, a network of those cities. So would segmentation of functions at different core extenuate inequality among citizens?
Inequality is discussed often within in economic terms. People living in different districts having distinct characteristics respectively may have different income levels, for instance, if you could compare in economic terms. But I think those functions developed through history are basically supported by residents, so they like it. And the fact that they have distinct characteristic would be a source of their pride. So inequalities with respect to income or economic terms, but whether residents will feel unfair, by differences, that's something different. I'd say, with the careful planning, with participatory mechanism, we can avoid or at least rectify the sense of inequalities.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hashimoto. Now, let me explore the concept of compact city a little bit more with Dr. Malari. Dr. Malari, we know that there are many cities, Paris, Melbourne, London, Portland, Manila, Barcelona, which are pushing for planning that orients towards 15-minute city. A 15-minute city would be made of compact, dense, socially connected, mixed-use neighborhood, where everything you can access within, let's say, 15 minutes, housing, jobs, shops, schools, etc. Could you tell us more about Metro Manila's effort in this direction? Because Manila is quite active in that. And also in the context of the transport plan, which is Metro Manila Dream Plan, which is also called Metro Manila Dream Plan. What opportunities and challenges have arisen because of this planning mantra?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Thank you, Prof. Tiwari, for that question. So for the compact city concept, or maybe I could see it as transit-oriented development, there are initiatives taken here in the Philippines, especially in Manila, but most of them are largely taken by the private sector. So for example, we have this like a district in Ayala, Makati, wherein there are high-quality pedestrian facilities that connect the workplace through the underpass. But I think one of the challenges that I see here is that currently, I haven't seen any local government units among the cities here in the Manila which take this approach to be their priority in their land use plans and their zoning ordinances. So you see, I think the downside if the private sector would take most of the initiatives is that they will benefit the most. And for me, from my observation in viewing the land use plans here in Metro Manila is that there is a lack, I think, the access to safe and efficient public transport, which I think is an important tool in connecting or informing these compact cities. Because sometimes there are districts here wherein maybe the workspace is there, the healthcare is there, the education is there, but sometimes the residents or people can't afford to live in those districts. So I think the local government units here, as well as maybe the national government, should play a big role in undertaking the formation of the transit-oriented development and the access to public transport for these compact cities. So I think there are ongoing initiatives.
Right. Thank you very much. Let me bring in Antoine at this stage because he has worked on a number of master plans. So Antoine, in your experience in preparing urban development master plan, how are conflicting objectives, some of those which Dr. Malari was also mentioning, such as environment, growth, healthy city, compact city, integrated?
Thank you very much for your question. So actually, I'm very happy that you're bringing this word of conflicting objectives, because it is also a terminology that I'm using a lot in my work, simply because I consider that it is actually the meaning of urban planning, to try to resolve conflicting situations, to try to make the balance between conflicting interests. Cities are populated by like thousands or even millions inhabitants, so they are very complex systems. So there's no such thing as one solution for everybody. So it is very complex knowledge. Even in the ancient Greece, like Socrates used to say that it takes the greatest wisdom to plan a city and to plan human activities. So it is actually very complex. So if you allow me, I will just bring 2 or 3 examples of how I think that urban master planning can try to resolve this kind of conflicting situation. The first one would be that, as you know, in cities, there is several different neighborhoods, 7 different zones, and each of them have natural characteristics, or they have differences in terms of, for example, access to social services such as schools or hospitals, or even, you know, some of the neighborhood may have well-developed infrastructure, while other neighborhoods may have, you know, deprived from infrastructure. So one of the first thing that we are doing in urban master planning is that we try to first inform and map those differences, those spatial differences within a city. And what we are doing is called urban expansion potential analysis. So we try to identify the push factors and the pull factors, basically the negative criteria and positive criteria, which would allow people to live in a good conditions. So basically, we have a lot of criteria, and we give a weight to all these criteria. So, for example, of course, flooding area would be a negative, criteria, whereas the proximity of, bus stop, for example, would be a positive criteria. So we merge all the criteria, and we end up with a map with a score of the place where people should live, the place where people shouldn't live. So the way you actually weight those criteria is already a trade-off. It's already something that you have to discuss a lot with local people. And it's not something that is given because, for example, let's say some kind of cultural aspects like the proximity of graveyard, for example. How do you weight the proximity of graveyard compared to other criteria, for example? So it is one of the trade-off that you do at first. So, there's a big part of subjectivity in cities. That bring me to my second point is like, Jane Jacobs used to say this a lot. It's you cannot apply a logic to a city because a city is basically, it's a people. The people who live in the city are the people that makes the city. So we have to deal with them directly. And not try to focus on the buildings or focus on the grounds or focus on physical things. So I think that the subjectivity of the people is another thing that is important to try to resolve conflicting situations. So that's another thing we are doing. Actually, it's quite classic, but it's household surveys, social surveys. We go to the city and we have a sample of, for example, 1,000 households. That's what we did in Nouakchott in Mauritania. And we asked the people, like, what is your ideal way of living? What kind of house do you want to live? Can you live in an apartment? Do you want to garden? We have a lot of different questions. And in order to understand their subjectivity, actually. And 2 things are important there is first is ask the good question. And second is make sure that the answer from the question can be integrated in the master plan. So we have to have tangible answers. So when you have, for example, 99% of the respondents say that they lack green areas, for example, in a specific part of the city, then you have a tangible lever, you have a tangible figure to put into your master plan to say there's a big lack of green areas, for example. So I think that, knowing about the subjectivity may help us resolve, these conflicting, objectives. And one final thing, if you allow me, is we often use what we call strategic environmental assessment approach, SEA approach in our projects, which allow us to have an exercise called evaluation and comparison of development alternatives. So before having the land use plans finalized, we think of all the different possible futures. So as Mr. Hashimoto explained, there is different paradigms possible, different city models. Do we want a compact city? Do we want a small town connected into a global region, for example? We compare all these kinds of alternatives based on what the local people the citizen and the decision makers actually will say to us. And here, one thing that is very important is that the cost, actually, the cost of urban development is one of the biggest indicators when we want to say which alternatives we will choose. Because, for example, the networking of small cities is very interesting, proposition, but it's very costly. Who will build the roads? In sub-Saharan Africa, for example, in developing countries, when you know that car ownership is just one car for 1,000 inhabitants, even if you build the road, you have to think about the public transportation. So one proposition will have a very bigger cost than another. So I think that considering the cost is something that it is crucial for making trade-off between conflicting proposition in urban planning.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very comprehensive answer. And let me go to one fundamental change that the cities are facing today is the environment. And let me bring in here Ms. Chaudhary, who comes from Bangladesh, who has a fantastic experience on working in Bangladesh. So as we know that Dhaka is one of the cities which is severely affected by the climate change. The coastlines are causing migration to Dhaka, which is extenuating further the problems that we see in the urban areas. So, Ms. Chaudhary, what initiatives or approaches have been taken to address problems that Dhaka and other cities in Bangladesh face?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Tiwari. Good afternoon, everybody, and good morning, wherever you are. I think Bangladesh and its capital city, Dhaka, would be a good example to discuss about the problems of urbanization or like environmental issues or climate-induced migration. So first, let me tell about the Dhaka. So it's a mega city. It's a mega city. It has all the problems. So very highly densely populated city. 23,000 people are living in per square kilometer. The most important problem with the city is that all development have been concentrated in Dhaka, and Dhaka, actually the economy of Dhaka contributes 40% of the Bangladesh's GDP. So now you can understand that how Dhaka actually is working, contributing in this country. And now if you see the problems, most of the problems, environmental problems or climate change problems is so prominent in Bangladesh because of its location. A study by World Bank, it says that annually 400,000 people are actually moving to Dhaka to settle there from the coastal areas of Bangladesh. And another study says that every day 2,000 people are actually moving to Dhaka. So you can understand the situation of the Dhaka city, the mega city Dhaka. Now the point is that what is it? Why these people are moving to Dhaka? There is a clearly push factor that the climate change problems or environmental hardships in the coastal areas or like in the rural areas, those are actually pushing people to move to their hometowns and go to the Dhaka for better living. And if you see the Bangladesh, the location, the geographic location is such that country is facing various kind of disasters and problems besides the environmental problems, disasters like floods, tornadoes, riverbank erosion, cyclone. And due to the climate change, countries experiencing erratic rainfall, short duration, high intensity rainfall, drought, and salinity intrusion, both surface water and groundwater. And the water in the coastal areas are not usable, and the lands cannot be used for agriculture production. So people have no means, just have to move to Dhaka. Now you can think about the situation, what is happening with these huge people, 21 million people now living in Dhaka city, and the core Dhaka, like around 10 million people are living. So, but in terms of amenities, there is not enough. So all these problems Dhaka is experiencing in terms of environmental pollution, noise, in terms of air pollution. So always Dhaka is in the headline of the newspaper in terms of livability of the city. Now, the point is that what kind of initiatives have been taken so far? So without considering climate change, any development initiatives cannot be considered for Bangladesh. So climate resilient, whatever we do in Bangladesh, climate resilient has to come first. And as you may know that Bangladesh is a champion now in climate adaptation, also leading the Climate Vulnerable Forum. So several the initiatives have been taken so far. I can divide it into two groups. One is policy interventions, and other is investment programs for the real development. Now, policy interventions, if you think about, there are so many policies in Bangladesh, especially focusing Dhaka's development, environmental improvement. For the climate change, there are strategies, climate change strategy and action plan, and national adaptation plan. But on the top of that, very recently, one initiative, one policy government has approved, which is called Delta Plan 2100. It's a very ambitious 100 years development plan with a long-term vision for achieving safe, climate resilient, and prosperous delta. So this is the policy interventions government is taking, and those are under implementation. But in terms of investment programs, there are three approaches government actually we can see in the country. First thing is that the coastal areas, some interventions, because people are every day moving, so many people moving from coastal areas to Dhaka and other cities. The cities are not livable at all. So that's why they're providing services to the climate vulnerable coastal areas, such as water is a big issue in those areas. So providing rainwater harvesting, small scale desalination services, rehabilitation of the embankments to protect the land from the flooding or excavation of the canals. So these are the activities going on in the coastal areas, which is mostly climate vulnerable. And then as you see that in Bangladesh, development is focused to the main city, like Dhaka, and the port city, Chittagong. There is another port city, Khulna. So, but decentralization is so important, and recognizing the decentralization, now the climate resilient development is being considered very seriously in the small towns, secondary towns. And now master plans, we have heard from the master plan development. So it's not very easy work. So master plan is being developed for the secondary towns, and those are, few of them are under implementation. But as I said earlier, whatever we do, we have to have the element of climate resilience. Otherwise, countries, any development will not sustain. So in the secondary towns, but also you have to think about the livability, because people are leaving Dhaka because for the many amenities, services, they have to have those in the secondary towns. So therefore, we are thinking of countrywide sanitation system, drainage system. This is so important because countries experience a lot of floods. The area is getting flooded after little rainfall even. Sanitation facilities, road, market centers, so that people can stay there, do not have to move to the city and over there. And then the third approach is that, the point is that people already moved to the Dhaka. Dhaka is now overcrowded. Or if we think about other cities like Chittagong or Khulna, they are also overcrowded. So those cities, they also do not have good infrastructure, and services also are failing in many cases. So considering that, also there are several interventions are going on. Huge investment programs are also going on. Dhaka has a master plan already. And besides that, there is also like water supply master plan, drainage master plan, sewage master plan. So those are under implementation, but that's going to take little time. Maybe after implementation, there will be some improvement. The livability of the city will be improved, we expect. So besides that, Dhaka is facing so much of traffic, pollution. So multimodal transport is also under consideration, like rapid bus transit system, inland waterways, so that pollution can be minimized to this. And besides that, a significant portion of the people are living in the urban slums. Those are actually who move from the coastal areas to Dhaka. So for them, affordable housing systems also are being considered. So considering all these small initiatives, problems are going to be addressed. We hope so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Chaudhary. I think that's very helpful. Now, let me bring in Dr. Malari here, because he has also worked on similar kind of issues in land use plan for different cities. So would you be able to give us some examples of how climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction has been mainstream in the land use plans?
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Tiwari. So regarding the resiliency of cities, yes, as you've mentioned, I've been involved in several land use planning projects of cities and towns here in the Philippines. And in the recent decade, we have been practicing mainstreaming climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction to the land use plans and the development plans. And sometimes we do a vulnerability and risk assessment. So we follow the framework of at least the IPCC framework, wherein vulnerability is a function of sensitivity, exposure, and adaptive capacity. And these are evaluated for the units which are exposed to certain natural hazards. And I think in the coming years, as Dr. Hashimoto presented earlier, there have been other threats apart from natural hazards, such as the phenomena of COVID-19. So I think the framework for resiliency of cities must expand, because we've seen this different kind of threat, and maybe just like the vulnerability assessment of cities to climate change, we can establish indicators for pandemics. Maybe we could ask questions like, up to what point should we densify the zones in the areas, because we've seen the effect of densification now in the threat of COVID-19 and other threats. So yeah, and there, in also my studies and in my dissertation, there are also, I think, land use simulation tools. So these tools are useful for projecting the land use growth of the cities. And we also take into consideration the effect of the climate change and other natural hazards as well for the cities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think one of the core area for ADB has been to improve the livability of cities. And let me bring in Chris Moon here. And Chris, could you talk to us about the integrated approach to improve livability of cities that ADB is proposing, and what does it include, and what does it mean for urban development and urban cities?
Sure. Thank you very much for the question, and thank you for the opportunity. In terms of ADB, Asian Development Bank, traditionally in the urban development sector, the projects were done in sectors, let's say water supply, water sanitation, and so on and so forth. Now we're trying to make a little bit of shift with the focus on livability. Not to say that sectoral approach does not answer the question of livability of cities, but our cities are in different levels of, let's say, different levels of development. Therefore, our cities have different requirements for livability. So for instance, when Ms. Chaudhry talked about Dhaka, perhaps water supply and water sanitation, supplying those basic services may be the core issues of livability, increasing livability in those cities. Now, for other cities, it may be different. So what the integrated approach that we're taking is, so based on an understanding that we have the cities have master plans or urban plan, workable urban plans, we're trying to see what are some of the key urban livability issues that the cities are facing, or some key opportunity areas. So for example, in the city of Bishkek in Kyrgyz Republic, air quality has been a huge issue, just like in Ulaanbaatar, in Mongolia, and other places in our DMCs. So we start from that. So what is the biggest, one of the biggest issues facing livability in Bishkek? It is air quality. Then we do analysis of, so what contributes to air quality in that city? And we come up with, based on that analysis, we do come up with areas where we need to touch upon in order for us to solve that issue. So such as transportation it's one of the huge issues, as well as power plants, Soviet remnant, as well as solid waste management and heating issues during the winter times, where people especially in the suburbs, they heat anything they can get because they don't have a sufficient supply of heating materials. So things of that sort. So we come up with areas where we need to touch upon, and based on understanding of what the cities, the resources of the city, the capacities of the city, including the governance and the financial resources, etc., we come up with 3 to 10 year action plan and come up with a roadmap in terms of what needs to be done in order for us to alleviate those issues. and come up with investment plan for the cities also. So in that way, it's not just for ADB investment projects, it is an investment plan for the DMC city where ADB can also participate. So it is one livability issue that the city may be facing, but having an integrated view in terms of what needs to be touched upon. And that includes policy and legislative measures, as well as institutions and governance issues. So that's kind of the approach that we are testing and see how we can make those changes.
Right, okay. Thank you very much. Dr. Hashimoto also spoke about smart cities in his presentation, and he said that these could be an interesting models of the future to address some of the problems. So how would you think that smart city initiative is addressing the problems that urbanization poses?
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you for that question also. Now, smart cities, I would first like to define what smart city is. I mean, there are really a lot of definitions on smart city, but based on my understanding, smart city is especially in ADB terms, smart city is not a goal in itself. So becoming a smart city really doesn't solve a lot of issues, meaning that, livable cities, making cities more livable is the strategic direction of ADB. And I think that is where we need to go in terms of the goal setting for our cities. Now, smart cities or the smart technology that gets engaged in the urban development is where it's utilized as a tool. It's one of the tools, but it is a tool that is essential for this age. So now, in terms of then urbanization, now urban development needs to be a little bit distinguished from urbanization. Now, just to give you a little bit of understanding in terms of what smart cities or the use of ICT can do, it's for one thing, efficient city management through ICT and infrastructure. So really kind of improving the efficiency of the infrastructures that we have, like the smart water management. So smart IoT connections for public service provision and delivery. So that's another. There is always also the e-government across governing bodies. So that's internal governing bodies internally to the government, as well as two-way communication between the government and the citizens. So that's where the participatory part actually does come in. And of course, there is provision of technology platform for economic development, stimulating economic development. And also, which is highly important, it has to do with data sets. So any kind of IoT, ICT elements that are embedded, they produce data. So what are we going to do with those data sets? So crunching those data and now through analysis, we have a better understanding of what are some of the issues that our cities are facing, and also to come up with some good evidence-based understanding through data analysis, so that we really point to the right direction in terms of where we need to scratch, where we need to resolve. Now, in terms of urbanization, I think there are many, many tools that are available from in terms of smart cities. But one of the things that we are doing, or many cities are adopting, is GIS-based spatial data platform. At ADB, we have something called SPADE, which is a GIS spatial data platform where we put different layers of data sets, and depending on what we're trying to do, we just crunch those data and come up with something and have an understanding of where our problems lie. For instance, in terms of storm, so we have good understanding of that, which areas in the Philippines or in Bangladesh it's prone to floods. So we have those historical data sets, and we have a good understanding of the topology of different cities, and be able to kind of layer those to see where a certain investment needs to be made to alleviate those problems. So it is a very good urban planning tool. And I think it is part of something that can be employed in order for us to do a good urban planning exercise. Now, urban planning has a lot to do with urbanization, and that translates to, let's say, growth management that Ms. Chaudhry had also talked about.
Thank you very much. Can I also ask you, are there examples from cities where smart city concepts, which you just mentioned, are working well, or which could be looked at or studied by others?
Yes, sure. Smart city is such a broad topic that it's difficult to just pinpoint to one or two cities. But, I think the key word for smart city is connection. So utilizing digital technology to make these different connections. And that includes governance as well. So I worked in the city of Seoul for quite a long time, and city of Seoul, they are quite, innovation is one of their keywords, not only the city itself, but I think the country itself is quite keen on that. And they implemented a lot of different programs and processes. And, I think those 5 elements that I had talked about before, they actually made a lot of measures to integrate them very well. Now in terms of it's really, there's too many examples, so it's very difficult to say in a couple of minutes or so. But that is a very good example. Now we know Singapore to be one of the best places in terms of they have something called Virtual Singapore platform, also that that you may know of, and there are quite a number of cities. So it's really the best practice cases would be really depends on the smart city implementation in which field. So is it governance, or is it really increasing the infrastructure or the public service delivery, or using the data sets to upgrade. So I think I'm not so sure whether I'm really answering your questions, but yeah, there are quite a number of cities, maybe not the smart city as a whole, but areas where they're very, very good at.
Thank you very much. Now we have just about 1 minute, so I'll probably ask Dr. Hashimoto as a final question. What roadmap do you think that cities should adopt to manage its urbanization in the future?
I was not expecting this question. I wanted to say something slightly different. We talk about city networking, and we know that the smart city is a hope, possibility, future hope. Then we can think of smart city network, naturally, smart network of smart cities. And to realize this, information sharing is a key, of course, as a prerequisite, necessary condition for complementary development. And this involves ownership issue, naturally, ownership and governance. So that's what I wanted to say at the end, Professor Tiwari.
Thank you very much. I think we are just at the time, and I'll pass it on to Veronica.
Thank you. That was an excellent discussion. So we will now move into the Q&A. I will be sharing the questions that we've collected on Menti. All participants can submit questions and also look at existing questions. So maybe Professor Tiwari, if you'd like to just pose the questions as they come up, you can start with this one.
Okay, so the first question is, networking cities is a good idea for avoiding constraints in the use of public transportation. What are other cities in the world not following this good examples yet? Maybe Dr. Hashimoto.
Oh, of course, transport network, transport and communication, I should say, of infrastructure to link cities, member cities of a city network are most important condition for a successful city networking. And well, I think many cities are following this. Professor Tiwari mentioned Randstad. I did some study, and Randstad is considered conurbation generally, but conurbation is not continuous urbanized area. Actually, in this Randstad region, 4 major cities and numerous small cities exist, and these cities are more or less independent, having its own unique function. And most importantly, they are linked by efficient transport system based on both road, highways, and railway. So, there is already an example. And I think if you think in a rational way, many more cities will follow this path. Can I answer this question partly at least?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Have I?
Yeah. How has COVID-19 affected the advantages or resilience of cities? Maybe I'll ask Dr. Malari.
Yeah, as I've mentioned earlier, I think all of us are new to the threat of COVID-19, and we've seen that sometimes we prefer to live in cities because all the opportunities are there. But because of the pandemic now, we've seen that the dense areas in the city, especially here in the Philippines, Metro Manila now is at a very terrible condition because of what's happening because of COVID. And we've seen that these dense areas, these heavily populated areas are now being affected. So I think towards the future, what the frameworks towards resilience will sort of change when it comes to like planning the land use of cities and assigning the categories for maybe the residential areas or even other things such as the commercial or the institutional aspects. Yeah, so I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, I think thank you very much. One of the things which I am seeing in my part of the world, in Australia here, and probably I will maybe pose this to Dr. Hashimoto as well, that there is an out migration from cities like Melbourne and Sydney to fringe towns or even rural areas. So what we are witnessing during this last 1.5 years of COVID-19 is that there is a sort of rurbanization happening in the sense that rural areas are becoming much more urbanized. Would you see such kind of trends happening, which are more like a antithesis to compact city, Dr. Hashimoto, in the future, given the kind of challenges that the world is witnessing?
As I said during my presentation, the ICT development and COVID-19 has been changing many things. Relationship between urban and rural areas, habitation pattern definitely, and even perception, spatial perception of people. So, Dr. Merari is more familiar with this. There has been a concept of rural-urban community or urban community, rural-urban community. That kind of communities may become more important. You cannot live in the pristine nature. You can, even if you have easy access to social services online, it has to have certain urban elements, even in the remote rural areas, definitely. For good reason that we like to communicate with people face to face for serious discussions. This is a compromise. Online meeting is a compromise. So rural urban communities would become more important as ICT development, COVID-19 changed the relationship between rural and urban areas, spatial perception, habitation pattern, and so on. This is my quick answer.
Thank you very much. Antoine, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just one quick opinion, but exactly as Mr. Hashimoto said, that the telework has been allowing people to move from big cities to more like rural areas. But we should not forget that people that can actually telework only represent like 30% of the employees in developed countries. So all the other jobs, like in agriculture or in services, people working as healthcare, for example, they cannot have this mobility. So it's a really a limited, I think, phenomenon. And basically, we see it in France also, like people who are in a somehow higher class, social class, can actually telework. So they move from Paris to smaller town. But what's happening is that when they used to live in Paris, they were using public transportation. but now they are buying 1 or 2 cars because they're doing, you know, meetings in Paris and then come back to their countryside. So there's a lot of impacts that is not, the question is about the cities, but I think the COVID-19 impacts should be more thought in terms of, you know, regional impacts, both on the cities and also in on the rural areas, I think.
Right. Thank you very much. The next question, private sector and businesses have a big impact on how cities function, how businesses must change their business models and ways of working to make cities resilient and sustainable. Antoine, would you like to take this question?
Well, I think, yeah, it's maybe a little bit linked to the answer I just gave previously, but yeah, you know, I think COVID-19 has impact in terms of city resilience. Like, as we said before, it's not the rural exodus, it's the urban exodus. People are leaving the cities now. And also teleworking and also industrial relocation. A lot of countries, including Japan and US, you know, they are relocating a lot their business and also their business models at the same time to more rural areas. In Japan, it is something that was already, you know, even before COVID, the how do you say, the difference of wealth between territories, between regions. You know, inside Tokyo, the Shinjuku-ku, so the ward of Shinjuku, has a bigger GDP than, you know, some developing countries, just one ward. So the amount of wealth that is produced in one small area inside Tokyo is comparable to the wealth created in an entire country. So this has to be more dispatched within the country, I think. Maybe Hashimoto-san can bring some knowledge about Japan, I think.
I think before we go to Dr. Hashimoto, let me ask Chris here, because it's talking about business model, probably the investment and financing model, and all these other things, which are important for the cities, for the businesses to include within their decision-making process. So do you think that it's much more that the businesses would need to do?
Was that a question for me? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So now, in terms of making cities more sustainable and resilient, and I think it has a lot to do with what kind of businesses we're looking at. But at the same time, I think with the, you know, countries actually making promises to be Paris Agreement aligned. So in terms of in terms of climate change and resilient factors, and sustainable means also responsible. So it's I think it starts with how you process your businesses. So, you know, in terms of business processes, what kind of fuel are you going to be using? What kind of materials will you be buying? And what are some of the procurement processes that your businesses will do? So that's in terms of, I guess, big businesses and smaller businesses at the same time. So I think it's those conscious decisions that businesses needs to make, the private sector needs to make, in order for them to do things differently than what they have used to do. And I think that also comes with the interaction with the government also. It has a lot to do with what kind of policies the governments would make and what kind of incentives the governments will give the private sectors to really make that push toward the change.
Right. Thank you very much. We can go to the next question. How do you perceive the trend of integration between urban innovation and climate action in Asia, especially in mega cities, where huge population concentrated, especially of young people? I think I can go to Farhat, you to respond to that, because you are looking at these challenges in a country which is dealing with these on a very daily basis.
Right. All right. Thank you very much. That's a very good question. Actually, without integrating this climate action in the development program, country will not survive or sustain. The most important point here is that there's a huge population and young people. So if we just bring the example of Bangladesh, Bangladesh is a huge population. Now the young population, this is like demographic dividend for Bangladesh. So if we really can make these people well orient, educate them in the climate impacts, all the technologies we can actually have them, so they will be the asset, they will be the resource. And I'm pretty sure that they will actually, when they will grow up slowly, they will be actually in the planning, in the policy making level, and they will be able to contribute significantly.
All right. Thank you very much. Could we go to the next question? In Indonesia, cities are developed with themes according to their natural products, like cattle, farming, industry, etc. How can cities cooperate in exchange of info, investment, and technology? I think this is a question which Dr. Hashimoto was also trying to address, where he was looking at some of the examples where cities can specialize, but also communicate and collaborate with each other. Would you like to take this question, please?
Okay, this question, in my opinion, is related to an earlier question on a new business model. I said during my presentation that farmers are essential workers, and most essential workers are poorly compensated. But if you look at the resources as capital, farming land is a capital, farming technology is capital, or knowledge rather. So new business model may emerge by introducing new methods of resource mobilization. I mean, this is very much in line with what Indonesia, this question from Indonesia, I suppose, trying to get at. The farmers, cattle farmers, livestock farmers, manufacturers can get together to contribute capital in different ways to form a new business model or something like that. So that usually farmers, livestock farmers, and primary processors are poorly compensated, and essential work, their work cannot be undertaken online. But if they become part of this new capital formation method, there would be a chance that they would be better compensated as a capitalist. Actually, this may appear to be a sort of cooperative, mastering different resources, capitals, resources included, to undertake new business. But well, actually, this is what I think capitalism is originally aiming at. So we can master capital, include resources, and knowledge may come, technology included. Technology is a part of information, would come from other participants to undertake joint business by new business model with new method of resource mobilization. Yeah, that's my answer. Thank you so much.
Here, there is another interesting point here, which is being discussed in literature widely, is that the complexity of an economy, the argument there by some of those economists is that the more the complex economy is, it has more scope for innovation and for economic growth. But if cities are being developed, which are not complex, which are specialized in a particular activity, would that have an impact on their ability to grow in the future?
I'm not the right person. I can't quite see the point you're trying to get at. Probably someone else.
Like, for example, if we look at, say, automobile industry in Japan, now it's one of the most sophisticated. The reason why it is sophisticated, because the firms which agglomerate together, they are very complex. They produce very highly complex products, which allows them to innovate further and make them one of those most competitive industry in the world. So I think what I was trying to aim at here is that the economies of scope also is important for cities. But if they are specializing in one particular activity, like what happened in Detroit, which was largely an automobile city, but it declined over a period of time because it was just one activity it was good at. So do you think that complexity is also important?
Well, complex economic activities would not need to be confined within the city boundaries, right? You mobilize resources in rural areas in terms of farmland, for instance, in terms of processors or whatever, and then those contributing different kinds of capital and information with respect to technology, for instance, would make a totality of complex economy, and so which does not need to be, contained within the city boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point here. Could we go to the next question, please? Right. So it's a direct question to Antonio, to you. What are your views for graveyards, in fact, counter graveyards for multi-religious cultural societies in cities of India, US, Australia, and Canada?
Actually, I was talking about graveyards just as an example of one, aspect of what should be integrated into the the trade-offs, or that on certain cultural belief that people are reluctant of living close to graveyards. I don't have any other views. I'm very sorry if somebody has something to add. It was just an example.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think we can go to the next question. All right, another question from Shakti Prakash to Antonine. Can city networking, as being talked by Professor Hashimoto, be a wise approach in situation? Okay, so I guess maybe you have already answered that. That was just a metaphor. You are not alluding too much. So I think we can skip this question. Okay, so this is a question for Fahad. What are your views regarding climate change and natural disaster resilience being achieved for all sectors of infrastructure?
All right. So actually, I think countries are working in terms of achieving something due to this climate change and natural disaster. All sectors are affected. Agriculture or other infrastructure sectors are affected. But as I mentioned earlier about the Delta Plan 2100, the 100 years development plan. So it says clearly that countries losing every year to 2.5% GDP due to the disasters, all these climate and natural disasters. So, so in that Delta plan, country actually has a very ambitious plan of 65 infrastructure project, and which actually cost about $38 billion US. So I'm very much hopeful that if we can actually implement all those projects, so we'll see some achievement in all sectors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could we go to the next question, please? Right. Thank you, Dr. Hashimoto and the panelists for your comments and thoughtful contribution. Interested to hear about how progressive inheritance tax and rent control can add a positive urban renewal. Right, so there are two aspects here. So one is that inheritance tax. The question is whether it should be levied or it should not be levied. And the rent control, which has an impact on the way the properties are used, can add to positive urban renewal. So who would like to take this one? Dr. Malari, would you like to?
Maybe I will be answering based on my expertise and just my previous experience in projects. So
course.
For inheritance tax and rent control, what comes to mind is, for me, is parcel mapping. So I think, as Ms. Chris mentioned earlier, there have been initiatives for organizing spatial data for all the land uses, and even with the advanced tools that have been emerging recently, so such as a GIS, and there also have been simulation tools. Now, I think by organizing the spatial database for inheritance tax and rent control for all the parcels in a certain town or in a certain city, these can lead to additional insights to creating more projects for maybe urban renewal on that certain area. So yeah, I think that's my opinion.
I think let me add a few things here. Like when you talk about progressive inheritance tax, in my opinion, I think progressive inheritance tax would allow the properties which are held by older people to monetize it and use it for their livelihood at the later part of their life. Because what happens is that many of the older people, they are asset rich but income poor. But due to this inheritance related advantages, they hold on to that properties because they can bequeath their properties to their children, and which is either taxed at a very lower rate or not at all. So if there is a progressive tax, it will bring those assets into the market and will have much better utilization, one of the asset, and also would assist older households to use that income for their living. Rent control is always a regressive in my opinion, because what it does, it affects the property markets from functioning properly. A better way than rent control would have been, if one wants to address the problem of affordability, would be more like a direct subsidy to income tested subsidy, which is on the demand side, rather than controlling the price in the market. Because controlling price in the market would not only affect the supply, but also would have an impact on maintenance of properties. Both are negative for the market. Dr. Hashimoto, would you like to have comment, a response to this one?
I don't know whether I can respond in a proper way, but rent control, if you're talking about land rent control can add to positive urban renewal, no doubt about it. But land is resources. As I said in my presentation, resources I see as capital. Capital per se cannot generate benefits. We are not talking about financial speculation. So capital would have to be utilized to generate benefits. And control of land rent in that sense, yes, depending on the way we control it, can add to positive urban renewal. Yes.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Right. Is there ADB-led smart city initiative being applied in Philippines? Chris, would you like to take this question?
Sure. There is, led by our Office of Public Partnership, there is a smart city initiative being designed and implemented in New Clark City, which is about 50 kilometers north of Metro Manila. So that is being led by ADB. I think it's co-led by ADB, but it is a PPP project. You know, as you know, New Clark City used to be a US military base. Now it is more or less kind of a greenfield development. You know, there are some brownfield development going on there as well, but they're trying to make that into one of the most connected connected in terms of digital technology. So yes, that is one of the projects. There are other smaller projects that are going on here and there, and it has a lot to do with, again, the definition of smart city. So are we talking about making an entire district into a smart city? Now that has a very different understanding than kind of retrofitting different smart technology, digital technology elements into existing projects. So let's say if we are doing a lot of water supply projects and we are implementing smart water technologies, which is a smart city solution for water supplies, such as water monitoring system, water pressure monitoring system to see where the non-revenue water is taking place so that we can directly go and dig up that part of the water pipe and be able to, let's say, install new pipes so that there are no more leakages. That is just one example. So there are different areas of different projects with smart technologies, but Smart City Initiative, that's the New Clark City in the Philippines, as far as I'm aware. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. We can go to the next question.
We're running short on time, so maybe just one more question and then we can close.
Most of the cities in South Asia do not have street tree management plans. Smart city plans, sustainability mobility plan do not have any mention about it. Professor Hashimoto, could you please comment? Question to you.
Is that true? Most cities in South Asia do not have street tree management plan. Okay. You're not saying that the streets in the cities in Southeast Asia don't have any street trees at all. It is not that question. Well,
I think the answer would be they should have
it. I don't think it's a trivial issue, but I think street tree management should be part of overall greenery management of urban areas. That would one important condition to not reduce CO2, but increase oxygen. I mean, that improve the CO2 balance, actually. So I don't think that's trivial. One small but a good point.
Yeah.
May I add?
Yeah, Farad, please.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. I don't see that kind of thing also, like living in South Asia, there's tree management plans. But I think this is very important thing considering COVID-19, the pandemics, and we had the master plan, the plans are being developed. So we should actually seriously consider about the greenery parts. And tree side is a very, it gives some scope of tree plantation, as Professor Hashimoto said, that it may help in carbon sequestration as well. But also one thing I can mention here, that through our development interventions financed by ADB or other development partners, we try to always make sure that the compensatory tree plantation, it may not be in the city, it may be anywhere in the country. If we cut one tree, we have to plant 3 trees at least. So this is how we can actually contribute, and cities seriously consider about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I guess maybe this was the last question that we wanted to take to this panel. So Veronica, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to Professor Tiwari for his excellent moderation, and also to all our panelists for a very insightful discussion. So we are now coming to the last part of our session today. So I now invite Ms. Kyoko Takahashi to officially launch our call for policy papers. Ms. Takahashi, over to you.
Thank you very much. And then thank you very much for all participants for the very meaningful today's discussion, with the highlighting how we can target on the further urban development for the post-COVID-19 world. Then today, I'd like to make an announcement of call for policy papers on rethinking cities for resilience and growth in the post-COVID-19 world as a chief of this project. So in today's Hashimoto's discussion, he importantly mentioned about the multi-core city, which can access to the resources efficiently. And this is presented as the one of the clues to rethink cities in terms of the city structure for the post-COVID-19 world. And in panel discussion, Dr. Tiwari encouraged the discussion on smart city, network city, and knowledge corridor. They are important concepts of city development which enhanced use of information and communication technology during COVID-19 pandemic. Then during the panel discussion, not only the city structure, but also Dr. Anthony Sawat mentioned that the actual big change of the citizens' well-being due to the COVID-19 pandemic, that he mentioned the importance of future research with qualitative research method. So based on today's discussion, we are highlighted that the COVID-19 pandemic raises people's awareness to require rethinking of the role and transformation of the cities. Then we project team seek original and unpublished papers that examine how cities can address urban development, governance institution, and demographic and social dynamics for the post-COVID-19 pandemic world in order to promote citizens' well-being. So the papers are required to use both in qualitative and quantitative research methods. Then qualitative research methods includes, for example, interviews, on-site observation, questionnaire survey, qualitative research questionnaire survey. And then qualitative research methods are macro socioeconomic data, questionnaire survey, big data analysis from mobile phones, GIS, and social media, etc. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, so the paper needs to target these 6 categories. And so these 6 categories are urban resilience, urban economics, and governance institutions, social dynamics, work facilities, and urban demographics. Then the authors choose which research method is preferable to seek novelty and originality to present how we should rethink cities for the post-COVID-19 world. Then the paper should include policy recommendation and implications. Then this call for policy paper doesn't limit the single use of research method, of course. So multiple uses of research methods are also welcome. The next slide is explaining the submission procedure. So we accept abstracts, which includes from 250 words to 300 words by 30th of November 2021. Then submissions from ADB member countries are also encouraged. Then about the selected abstracts, the authors will be notified by 7th of January on 22nd. Then authors of selected abstracts are requested to submit their full paper, which contains from 5,000 words to 7,000 words by 4th of March 2022. Then additionally, authors of the full papers will be invited to present their work on the virtual training workshop sometime in 2022. It will be informed by later. Then finally, the full paper will be considered as an ADBI publication. Then let me show the link of the ADBI website to actually showing the call for paper. Maybe I cannot do it. So on the ADBI website, we're officially announced already about the call for paper. Then we are looking forward to receiving abstracts in order to rethink cities for post-COVID-19 world. Then is that possible to show the actual website right now?
Oh, yes. Just give me a moment.
So this is the call for paper. So it's already launched. So we are very much happy to receive abstracts till 30th of November. Thank you very much.